In his letter to the church in Galatia, St. Paul has addressed the problems of the day in that fledgling church. Reading their mail these past 2 Sundays, we've dropped in on some of their problems predictable, considering the mix of human beings, each with their own gifts and visions and histories and desires. In the course of interactions and decision-making among human institutions, we see today that human nature doesn't change. We have to be taught to live for the good of others rather than to promote our own interests. We have to make a decision to do that. We see the blight that serving one's own needs before the good of others brings to our community, our state, our nation, and the world. And we all live with the angst and pain and sorrow and the loss of sleep that human conflicts bring. Today, there seem to be more of these problems than I can remember coming at any one time in my lifetime. It's as if evil personified were growing stronger in the world and working overtime to come up with ways to destroy the good that human beings might do. Actions and decisions we learn of in the news daily have an immeasurable effect on our present and our future. The undercurrent running through my thoughts last week was the introduction to the Kingston Trio's song of the 1960s, the MTA. These are the times that try men's souls. Remember that deep, doleful voice that seemed to come from the deep, dark cavern? That voice speaks to my soul today. And I have to fight against being drawn down into it. I have to believe that hope lives in the world. How do we find it? I know you heard the bishop's sermon on hope read last Sunday. Today we have Paul's letter. Let's look into it and seek that candle flame of hope in the fog of human darkness. Bear one another's burdens. That's a good place to start. It seems to me that the hope God gives us is hidden in Jesus' teaching, in God's ancient revelation to Israel, that we live for the good of others. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. I will say, on these 2 commandments, in desiring a better way than trusting in oneself alone, hangs the life of the world. And in these 2 commandments lies our hope. You shall love. It's human nature to look inward. We worry about having enough so we can enjoy a good and comfortable life, and for good reason, given the construct and pressures of our world. But the problem is that the standard for a good and comfortable life can take on a life of its own. Concern for one's own life slides into being the main concern, and that leads to more and more self-centered interests and actions. The focus is turned inward, away from the places in the world where a good life cannot be found. Understanding what is a good life is swayed by the definitions of the world: pride, power, success, domination, possessions, competition. Those things the world seems to hold dear. The results? Autocrats out of control, war, disregard for the lives and rights and dignity of others, policies that widen the gap between those who can and those who cannot provide for their own needs. Seeking to bear one's burden, seeking to bear one another's burdens is a powerful antidote to the evils of serving one's own interests. You and I know that worry and despair can be paralyzing. Abuse and sin seem so large, and they are, that we're tempted to give up. What, after all, can we do about war, about abuse and violence and the killing of our children, our neighbors, our environment? And lately, critical decisions and actions show themselves to be on the side of destruction. Our prayers and our actions seem doomed to failure. Is this the way the world will end? Is this the predictable end of our great and fragile experiment in democracy? Are we watching once again the brutal crucifixion of love, the central tenet of our faith, the one thing that can save us, on a cross of neglect and self-interest? Paul writes, "Take care that you yourselves are not tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and in this way you fulfill the law of Christ." He continues, and I'll paraphrase, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for you reap whatever you sow. Those who sow to their own flesh will reap corruption from the flesh, but those who sow to the Spirit of love will reap eternal life from the Spirit." So let us not grow weary in doing what is right, for we will reap at harvest time if we do not give up. So then, whenever we have an opportunity, let us work for the good of all, and especially for those of the family of faith. Let us work for the good of all. Paul could have written, "In the greatness of God's scheme, we will reap at harvest time." For the promise is not that we will see the ultimate victory of love today or tomorrow or in our lifetime. Honestly, I don't know when God will complete God's purpose. I do believe Paul is right. God is not mocked. Human beings will reap what they sow. This is where trust and faith come in. For the harvest time is for God to bring and for God to accomplish. The promise is that those who sow to the Spirit will reap eternal life from the Spirit. Eternal life, that peace in which we can begin to participate and enjoy today. That peace that only God can give. Hidden in that promise that those who sow to the Spirit of love will reap eternal life from the Spirit is that flame of hope. God does not demand that we solve all the problems of the world. The ancient prophet Micah tells us simply, "He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." To act justly, to love mercy, to love our neighbor and the world God has given into our care. To let love, not despair, determine our vision and our hope. To walk humbly with your God, to love God, to pray, to ask humbly and openly what God will have us do to bring God's kingdom to reality, and then to serve to that end. God's kingdom is being perfected in each one of us. No, God does not ask us to save the world. That's God's work. Our work with God lies in our own place in the world, in whatever action God leads us to take. Loving our neighbor, bearing one another's burdens, is a call to action. What can each of us do? First, of course, pray. God can do wonders in the hearts and minds of people who bring pain to the world. And God can do wonders in our own hearts and minds. Settle on one or two things about which you are passionate and live that passion. Does it wring your heart out to see God's beautiful world polluted and destroyed along with that ultimate harm to living, breathing plants and animals and human beings? Learn about ecologically beneficial practices, about native plants, about returning part of your lawn to nature, and take a few steps in that vision. Live out your love for God's beautiful and much abused creation. Do you weep for people do you weep for people desperately trying to come into our country to escape lives of fear, to find a better future for themselves and their children? We can't fix the Texas border, but we can volunteer here in Shreveport to comfort and help those coming in legally. The Church for the Highlands has a great ministry with immigrants, and they need volunteers and money. We can put pressure on Congress to pass good, fair immigration laws and to care, to lessen the suffering. Live out your passion that all people deserve to have a good life. Do you scream in despair every time a mass killing happens in a school or a mall or a church or a parade? Again, arm yourself with facts and pressure those who represent us in our state legislature and in Congress to swallow their pride and push away their fears and do something to stop this, to control the sales of weapons of war. Live out your hope for an end to violence. Bishops united against gun violence, as well as our own bishop, have urged Episcopalians to be active. Are you frustrated and angry at the decisions coming from our highest court? Do you fear the direction their decisions will take in the future? Work to elect people who will pass laws protecting human beings' basic rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Laws that cannot be ruled unconstitutional. Vote. Live out your respect for the dignity of every human being and for the highest ideals of our nation. Volunteer in whatever ways you can in campaigns to elect people this fall who care about the environment, the rights of LGBTQ people and women and Black and brown people, and those who are poor and oppressed without opportunity. Elect people who care about the lives of children and people who are killed violently every day. People who will not know a future that offers them a good life. Work to elect those people who believe people should make their own decisions about their own bodies and about whom they will marry. Live out your promise to respect the dignity of all people. We have opportunities right in our neighborhood. Holy Cross's primary ministry is to the poorest of the poor, the homeless. Donna at Hope House is finding permanent housing for people who have been living on the streets. We can help there. We can give money. We can ask Donna how we can volunteer. Community Renewal has been working for 25 years in the most broken neighborhoods of our communities, Bossier City and Shreveport, to educate, to advocate for the people in those neighborhoods, to give them the tools they need to build a better life for themselves. The Fuller Center for Housing builds houses for people who never dreamed they could be a homeowner. Complacency is giving up, giving in to evil. To love is to care, and to care is to feel and to act to bear the burdens of others. Here, loving and serving others, we discover by accident that candle flame of hope. And we feed it. We don't have to look for hope. Hope lies within the acts of love, within the deeper, holy passion of serving others. In the beginning, when there was nothing, God was there. God's world was created in God's love and God's hope for a good place where every person would sit under their own vine and fig tree, and justice would roll down like the waters. God, not evil, created all that is in love and in hope. And then God invited us to join God's work, sharing that hope in love. Let's not miss God's call to action. Let's not relinquish our hope to a lesser promise. Tomorrow is the 246th birthday of our great country. This is a time when we can look hard at that greatness and ask, how do we want that greatness to be measured? In might? In prosperity? In wealth? Wouldn't it be wonderful if one day our greatness were to be measured by our compassion? Thornton Wilder's Pulitzer Prize-winning book of fiction, The Bridge of San Luis Rey, is about the lives of 5 people who died when an ancient bridge collapsed outside Lima, Peru. He ends the book with the words of Abbess Madre Maria. But soon we shall die, and all memory of those 5 will have left the earth, and we ourselves shall be loved for a while and forgotten. But the love will have been enough. All those impulses of love return to the love that made them. Even memory is not necessary for love. There is a land of the living and a land of the dead, and the bridge is love, the only survival, the only meaning.